Hello there everybody, it is me XfreezerBunny and welcome back to another video. And welcome to the first part of Redesign Newcrest. So this will be my first video on this new series, and the plan is to make this into a Japanese inspired save file. So I've been getting bored of the worlds that we had in game, so I felt like I really wanted to have a change of scenery. That's why I decided to do this. Like, as much as I love all of the European and American themed worlds that we have, I just felt like I needed, more of an Asian themed world as an Asian myself. So yes, this is going to be a brand new series, and the first thing I need from you guys are some name suggestions. At the moment, I'm just referring to this as re.newcrest, which is basically short for Redesign Newcrest, but eventually I would like to give this an actual proper name. So yeah, please leave some suggestions if you have any. I would prefer some original sounding names because I really don't want any confusion with actual real life places in Japan. Speaking of which, I really didn't try to recreate any place in particular. I just imagined this being, an urban area, but not necessarily downtown Tokyo, if you guys get what I mean. Maybe somewhere in the suburbs or like the outskirts of a big city. So that's basically the plan. Anyway, before I talk about the build itself, I just want to quickly mention a couple important things about the save file. First off, I'd like to keep this CC free. Luckily, I don't really see me needing to use any CC for the save file. As far as which packs I'm gonna use, I decided not to limit myself on this one. I have all of the packs, so I don't really want to limit myself too much by, narrowing down my options to just a couple of packs. So hope you guys understand. Also, there won't be a fixed schedule for this series because I just really want to, take my time, make all of the builds as good as they can be, and, I will try to upload regularly along with my regular speed builds as well, so you guys can get a variety of builds on the channel. Also, I plan to share this save file after we've completed all of the builds, and yes, I do plan to share the builds individually on the gallery, so please check the description. Usually all of the download links will be on there if it's already up on the gallery. So yeah, I had to write that down so that I don't forget anything, but I think that's pretty much all of the important things covered, so let's actually talk about this build itself. So this is supposed to be a Japanese Buddhist temple. To be honest, this is also one of my most complicated builds, so I don't know what I was thinking when I decided to make this into the first build for this series, but here we are. This is basically inspired by some of the most famous temples in Japan, specifically Horyuji Temple in Nara. And I'm gonna be completely honest with you guys, this is not my first time building this pagoda. I've actually already built this just out of curiosity like 3 months ago, even before I decided to do this series. But after I finished it, I shared it with a fellow simmer friend on Twitter, and I told her I was gonna make this series. So yeah, that's basically just me saying that this series has been in the works for 3 months. But let me tell you guys, this pagoda is probably the most intricate build I've ever done, especially because of all of these structural pieces that support the roof, which are called brackets. These are wooden brackets called Tokyo, Hopefully I'm pronouncing that correctly because it's literally spelled exactly the same as the Japanese capital city. But yeah, this technology came from China, and I think it really gives the builds this realistic look. So yeah, I was very meticulous with this build, and I did a lot of research. Actually, those 3 months that I had preparing for this build was just mainly me doing research. Like, I didn't even record anything. And let me tell you guys, I actually enjoyed the whole researching process. I don't know, it's probably just my inner history buff, but I did actually take up a course on college on Japanese architecture and just Asian architecture in general, but I didn't remember a lot as I was, deciding on whether I was going to do this build, so I had to read up on a lot. Luckily, there's a lot of resources on Japanese architecture, so I definitely enjoyed that whole process. So this pagoda ended up having 4 stories. Typically, in real life, they would have an odd number of stories, so it would be 3, 5. Unfortunately, that's not possible to have 5-story pagodas in The Sims 4 because we are limited to 4 levels, basically. But here, I'm actually incorporating some false balconies using a combination of shelves and railings from Get Famous. And as you guys may have noticed, I am doing a lot of what I would like to call prefabrication in this build, which is basically a technique of, doing something, saving it as a room, and just copying and pasting it, because I think that's hands down the most efficient way I can do this. If not, I would literally be spending days placing all of these items individually. I counted how many corbels I used for this bracket system, and I think I ended up using 500. Luckily, I didn't have to place all of those individually. I just had to place a couple and just copy and paste them in place. Anyway, inside of the pagoda, you can definitely climb to the top of it. Some pagodas in Japan are actually just decorative, like you can't actually climb to the top of it. But typically the purpose of pagodas are actually to serve as reliquaries. It is believed that some relics of the Buddha are buried inside of pagodas, and sometimes they're also used as observation towers, and I feel like that's more appropriate for the purpose of this particular pagoda that we have in this build. Also, you will notice that there is a log in the middle of the pagoda that runs through up to the very top, and that is mainly inspired by the Horyuji Temple Pagoda, which has a log in the middle of it, and people believe that that is the secret to the structural strength of the pagoda, because believe it or not, the Horyuji Temple is over 1,000 years old. It is the oldest wooden temple in the world. It is the oldest wooden structure in the world. Moving on, we are building another one of the important structures of this temple, and it is this main gate. Now, there will be 2 gates for this temple. There's one minor one, and then there's this one major one, which is, I believe, called the Neomon. And that is mainly because there are 2 guardian figures on either side of the gate to basically guard it from, all of the evil. So yeah, I will be putting some statues on those niches on the ground level of this one. But once again, I am using this false balcony technique. I didn't use the elaborate bracket system for this one because I didn't feel like it was necessary, to be honest. This build ended up having a lot of different structures, and that bracket system will be used on 2 of them. For the rest, I will be using just a normal trim from in-game, and I feel like it also works really well as well. Once again, here I am just copying and pasting all of the stuff that I already built so that we can be a little bit more efficient with our time here. But overall, I was actually really happy with how this turned out. Just a little bit of detailing here to give it more of, you know, that wooden detail you would expect for a Japanese temple. Now, I will say I also plan to make a Shinto shrine for this series. I'm not going to give away too much of the series, but I have already worked out all of the builds, you know, for this series. You know, I haven't actually been to Japan, but I have been to many temples around East Asia, and I have seen quite a lot of similarities. If you guys can think of anything to improve this temple, please let me know in the comments. I'm definitely open to revisiting all of these builds after we've done, you know, the builds, simply because it is, you know, a long-term series. So I feel like it'll be easier to make some changes, you know, as long as you guys comment it down and let me know. I'm definitely open to making changes. Moving on to the main hall of this temple, which I believe is called the Honden. This is basically just a huge open space, and inside there is an altar to the Buddha, I guess, of this temple. You guys will see how I achieve that once we get into the furnishing, but this is just a, you know, a structure located in the very center, in the heart of this temple. And here I'm actually fiddling with the roofing a little bit so that I can have this overhang over this main staircase area. And yeah, here I'm just using some more detail to make it look a little bit more elaborate compared to the rest of the structures in this temple, simply because this is the main hall, so I feel like that would have, you know, some degree of importance with it. Once again, here I'm using these corbels. Are they corbels? I'm not sure. These are from Get Together, by the way, and I'm just using them to add more detail to these columns. And yeah, I'm really happy with how they look. Actually, it did take a little bit of time to, you know, do all of the details, but it was worth it. Overall, I was really happy with how this temple ended up. This is the bell tower. Once again, this is another feature of many Japanese temples, and basically what this does is just to keep track of time, basically. And this is the other structure in this temple build that uses these elaborate bracket systems, just to add more detail and quote-unquote support to the roof. But yeah, this structure, I wasn't sure where I was gonna place it at first, so you guys will see me place it all around this temple courtyard, but I think I ended up with placing it almost on that exact same spot. There's really nothing inside of it, there's just a light which looks like a bell, and that's pretty much it. I wish I had a better item I could have used for that, I guess, but you know, I'm fine with the light that I ended up choosing, because that kind of looks like, you know, the type of bell you would see in, you know, a structure like this one. And we are moving on to another one of the lesser important structures of this temple, which is basically the lecture hall or the meditation hall. I really specifically left the purpose of this hall ambiguous, because obviously this temple is not going to be functional in the same way a real life Japanese temple would function, right? So this hall right here could be used for multiple purposes. Like if you want, you can bring your Sims here to meditate. You can bring like a yoga mat or a meditation chair and meditate inside of this main hall. In my mind, I also thought of making this into like a wedding venue, I guess, so you can put, a wedding arch in there and have your Sims get married in this temple. I don't think that's what they actually do in Japanese Buddhist temples, but if you want to make this even more functional, you can also do that as well. And here I am just repositioning all of the structures around this central courtyard, and I did go for a more axis based positioning for all of the important structures of this temple. And here we are now making the gate that basically surrounds the whole thing. Oh, sorry, not the gate, the fence. Typically, temples would have like corridors that surround all of the main buildings as like the main fence, but I didn't really feel like that was necessary for this build since it was already so detailed. So I just ended up deciding to surround this with a basic wooden fence instead, and I think it still works. And here we are building basically the minor gate, which actually opens onto the pagoda. And once again, I like how everything has an access that leads to something else. And yeah, I actually really like the way this secondary gate looks. I think it looks very Japanese, and you guys will see me use this fence from Strangerville all over the place in this build. I think it really suits the whole wabi-sabi look of this architecture style. And here I've already done the incense burner, which is a typical thing you would find in many Buddhist temples around the world. I wasn't loving the first one I did, which was the cauldron from Realm of Magic, so I actually looked on Show Hidden Objects and I found a piece from university. I think it's supposed to be a planter box or something, and I thought that was a better choice for an incense burner. To be honest, I haven't seen a stone incense burner, but I think it still works. And here we are making this donation box in front of the main portico of this temple. So basically that's where you would, make your coin donations and also offer your prayers. I also put like a string or like a piece from debug that symbolizes the string that you would pull on after you've made your coin offerings and after you made your hand gestures, just to make things a little bit more realistic. I believe that's something that they do in Shinto shrines. I'm not sure if that's something they do in Buddhist temples. You guys might have to correct me on that. But now we're moving on to the interior of this main hall, and basically this is all about this main altar over here. Luckily, I was able to find some resources online that explain all of the different parts of these altars, so I will say that I did manage to get this looking pretty realistic given all of the content we had in game. So in the middle we have the main image that is enshrined in this temple, and I used a statue from Island Living. Actually, it's like a sitting stone statue. So yeah, there's quite a couple of those actually in Island Living, but I ended up using this one because that one kind of felt very sacred and ancient. On either side we have flowers, and we just have a bunch of tables and offerings over here for some incense burners and some candles. I have seen that they do have candles in Buddhist temple altars. I ended up actually using a very European looking candelabra, but I saw it as more of an antique, that has been bought from Europe maybe a century ago. So that's my way of explaining it. Typically these altars would have like little musical instruments that are like percussion instruments. I could not find anything like it in game, so those are supposed to go on those bar stools on either side of like the main altar, and then there's also some boxes over here that keep the main, Buddhist scriptures that the monks would read, and of course I also put some chairs for the monks to sit on as well. I also noticed that in Buddhist temples there's also like some secondary altars on either side of the main altar, so that's what I'm doing right here. They're not as elaborate, but they also have some areas for prayers and some offerings as well. Once again, I will be using some statues from Island Living as well. I'm using these ones because they look like they kind of have a face. And yeah, on either side, it's the same composition on both sides, but I just put in some, ceramic looking jars, and I think I put like a table in front with some offering, which I ended up using the ones from last year's Lunar New Year patch. That always comes in handy every time I do these more Asian themed builds. And yeah, there's really nothing much to this room, actually, just adding in a couple more details. But there is a door that leads to that little corridor to this lecture/meditation hall. And speaking of this hall, once again, there's really nothing in this. It's just a big open space with some tatami mats, and in the middle of this main hall towards the end there is like another altar. It's not as elaborate as the one in the main hall of this temple, but it's still kind of like a centerpiece altar. I thought about using those Chinese zodiac wall art from last year's Lunar New Year patch, but I ended up deciding not to use it, and I just ended up deciding to use this scroll from City Living instead. And on either side we have a flower and a candle. I will change that candelabra because I felt like it was way too much for this lesser secondary altar. And I did put one seat for a monk to do their rituals, and also some boxes to have some storage for the scriptures, the Buddhist scriptures, because that's also very important in these temples as well. I also put like a stereo on this hall because I looked up reference images online and I did see some of them having stereos. I think it's like, I don't know, maybe for like meditation music or something, I don't know. But we are now starting work on the landscaping, and I think at this point I've already finished building another little part of this build, which I actually decided to make into a separate speed build all on its own. So this temple does actually have a little market, or like a little shopping, street food area on one side of it, but I decided to just save it for a separate speed build because I would like to focus on that on its own. Technically it's still part of this build, but yeah, like I said, I'd rather focus on that on its own speed build, and also just leave the focus of this video on this temple basically. So for the landscaping, we just did some like Zen inspired landscaping. So we have a lot of really large trees and some bonsais inside of some pots, and over here we have a little rock garden. Nothing too crazy, but I think it gets the job done, if I do say so myself. And just to light up the space, I am going to be putting in these lanterns as well. Also, that incense burner has a chimney inside of it, and on the second upper level of this gatehouse there will be a fireplace. So if you can teleport your sims on there, you can light the fireplace and the incense burner will look like it is actually burning incense. And here I'm just making kind of like a merchandise table. It's basically just a bulletin board with a bunch of merchandise and pamphlets so that people can have some information regarding this temple. But it looks like that's actually going to be it for this build, so hopefully you guys enjoyed it. Please let me know what you thought about it in the comments below. I'm so excited to be doing this series with you guys, and the next build should be up really soon as well, so please keep an eye out on that as well. Other than that, I'm gonna go now. Thank you guys so much for watching. You all have an awesome day. Enjoy the rest of the video, and I will see you guys next time. Bye bye.